Fan request. So, this is a question that was the most common one asked of me. Very good question by several subscribers or people that have watched my channel. And that is, who do I think will be the first country to win the World Cup outside of Europe and South America? Now, a lot of you guys asked me this question just in different ways, so consider this one giant answer. I also want to answer another subscriber's question regarding what do I make of the future of Chile, the Netherlands, and the USA now that they have failed to qualify for the World Cup. And I'm bringing this into this video along with the first question that I mentioned because I think the answers are related, and I'll get to that. So before I give a direct answer, I want to say that I think the next country that will win the World Cup for the first time, in general, I think is going to come from Europe. I just do. I think that it's going to be Europe. It's going to be Europe. And specifically, I'm going to cheat here a little bit because I have two countries in mind. One for the immediate future and one for the next 15 or so years. The immediate future, I think we could see a new European country win the World Cup for the first time as early as next summer. And that country, I think, is Portugal. I look at this Portuguese team and I see what they did in the Euros. Under Fernando Santos, I feel like they've gotten better as a squad. I think maybe they'll learn from their failures at the Confederations Cup. And I consider them a contender to win the World Cup. You know, before in the past, we always speak about Portugal as a potential dark horse to go far in a tournament. I think they're world championship caliber right now, and I think this current Portuguese team rivals the Portuguese team of the early 2000s. So I think the answer to that question might very well be Portugal. And it's not a prediction. I'm not picking Portugal to win the World Cup. I don't think they will win the World Cup. I mean, I'm leaning towards them not winning it. But they are the only thing right now that is keeping me from being fairly confident in the next country that I'm going to mention, and that is the Netherlands. If Portugal do not win the World Cup next summer, I believe the next country in general to win the World Cup for the first time is going to be the Netherlands. They did not qualify this time. They're going to take a few years to sort out their problems within their domestic league and their national team woes as well. But I see the Netherlands pretty much going through the same thing right now as Germany did in the late 90s and early 2000s, which was they had a couple of good tournament performances sprinkled in with a couple of really bad tournament performances. The Netherlands doing really well in World Cups 2010 and 2014, but crashing out in Euro 2012 and not even qualifying for Euro 2016. Germany making the World Cup final in 2002, sandwiched in between two Euros failures at Euro 2000 and Euro 2004. And I think the Dutch are going to go through a similar process where they have to completely make huge changes to their Eredivisie. I do think within the next, this is a prediction, I think within the next 20 years, I'm not betting on anything because I don't believe in that, but I think the Netherlands are going to win the World Cup within the next 20 years. I do think they'll be back. I think they'll be stronger than ever. I think they will become the 9th country overall to win the World Cup. Now, Now that I've gradually build up to answering your question directly, who will be the first country or confederation to win the World Cup outside of Europe and South America? Well, let's look at the contenders first. Looking at the present state of football, from each confederation, I only see a handful of teams that I believe can go on to win the World Cup based on the trajectory of the path that football is taking in their countries. From Asia, the only plausible candidate I can see right now is Japan. I like the way Japan look. You look at the J League, which is their domestic program. It has taken off really well in the last 20 years. I think the J League right now is more advanced and is ahead of the MLS here in the United States. So I look at Japan and I think that by 2050, I think Japan will be a superpower in this sport. I do. Especially as their players move abroad and get more European international experience at the club level. So from Asia, I think Japan. South Korea is good at the youth level, but I just don't see them. I don't see them doing very well at the senior level right now. This is probably the worst they've been at the senior level in many years. Australia might get there. I do think Australia will become a big player one day, but if I have to choose one team from Asia, I think could be the best candidate to be the first country outside of Europe and South America to win the World Cup. I'm going with Japan from Asia. Um, Oceania, no one from there. I'm sorry. Uh, at least not in the foreseeable future. Um, from Africa, I only see two countries. I look at the youth level, and two countries that I see are perpetually punching above their weight and performing up to expectations and doing well in youth tournaments. I see are Nigeria and Ghana. They're really the only. If Africa ever wins the World Cup one day, I believe it's going to be either Nigeria or Ghana who do it. Nigeria is the largest populated country in Africa. They produce some of the best youngest talent. I think the best youngest talent in Africa. Nigeria has won the under 17 World Cup several times. Ghana has won the under 20 World Cup once. At the youth level, they are pretty good. They're in the quarterfinals of the under 17 World Cup right now. And given the side of the bracket they are in, it's plausible they could go on to get to the final and even win the tournament. It's possible. So I see Nigeria and Ghana being contenders from there. And then we have CONCACAF, where I think both at the youth and senior levels, Mexico is always going to be a contender. I think Mexico, I say right now, Mexico is the best soccer country right now in the world outside of Europe and South America. You ask me who's the best national team right now outside Europe and South America. It's Mexico, and it's been Mexico for quite some time, in my opinion. So at the youth level, I'm not worried about Mexico. I'm not worried about them taking a hit. Senior level, they just finished one of their best World Cup qualifying cycles they ever have. I think they're a strong contender to get to the quarterfinals next year in Russia. The other one is Costa Rica, traditionally a long historical footballing country from Central America. Costa Rica usually qualifies for World Cups. They went on a great run in the last World Cup. So I think they're always going to be around in the conversation. Remember, Europe and South America is excluded from this conversation because I'm trying to answer your question. And believe it or not, call me biased, whatever you want. Call me crazy because of the fact they did not make it for 2018. I think the United States is in the conversation as well because I see soccer in this country heading in the right direction overall, even if I have disagreements about the overall leadership in the USSF. I think you're starting to see in the last 15 or 20 years, you're starting to see younger people being more involved with the sport. Television viewership has gone up. talent-wise, we're doing pretty well in youth tournaments lately, both in the under-20 World Cups and under-17s. And marketability because of the whole profit motive, but also because of the cultural fan base here, the fact the United States is one of the most diverse countries in the world, I think that really helps from a footballing perspective because you're getting people from different cultures that are involved in this sport. So I do think the United States is in the conversation, and I believe in my heart that not qualifying for 2018 will not set the program back for several years. I think it's going to basically make the issues that we had already come to the surface, and they would have to be addressed sooner rather than later. Now, that's no guarantee that we're going to solve those issues now because it all depends on us and it all depends on, unfortunately, the leadership we have in the USSF, which I think is not very good. But I do think, given the progress the United States has made since the early 1990s, I do think U.S. soccer is still headed in the right direction generally. And I do think the United States will be in the conversation as far as representative from CONCACAF to go far in a World Cup or at least win a World Cup. So let's go through those countries that I just named. Japan, Nigeria, Ghana, Mexico, Costa Rica, and the USA. Those are 6 countries outside of Europe and South America that I think one of those countries are going to win the World Cup for the first time. They'll be the nation outside of Europe and South America to do it. You want me to narrow it down? I'll tell you what, I'm not going to narrow it down to one team. I'm going to narrow it down to one confederation. I think it's going to be CONCACAF. I think it's going to be CONCACAF because I look at Africa right now with Nigeria and Ghana, and they're not really taking the talent they have at the youth level and properly transitioning it to the best of their ability to the senior national squads, because we see countries like Nigeria consistently do well in under-17 World Cups, but then when it gets to the national team, yeah, they did well in the last World Cup in Brazil, but Nigeria has not become a superpower in this sport. Ghana has not become a superpower in this sport. And a lot of it has to do with the limitations, the lack of resources, the finances that the Ghanaian and Nigerian FAs have. And on top of that, African football in general tends to be very corrupt. There's a lot of corruption going on. There's a lot of corruption going on in CONCACAF too, but I think African football has more corruption overall. And that's saying something because CONCACAF is also very corrupt. Don't get me wrong. It's not something that is unique to Africa. I think most federations in the world, no matter where they are, in Africa, outside of Africa, most are corrupt. But Africa has a systemic problem that I think is still not properly addressed. And then you have countries like the United States, Mexico, and Costa Rica who do have the resources, who do have the finances to grow their programs. I think the reason why countries like Nigeria and Ghana have done so well in youth tournaments is because of the raw talent that they produce in general sort of compensates for any limitations they have, the leadership in their respective federations. So it's like a trade-off, so to speak. I think the first confederation to win the World Cup outside of Europe and South America is going to be CONCACAF. I think it's going to be one of Mexico, Costa Rica, or the United States that wins it. But to answer another part of the question of when do I anticipate this will happen, as Battlefield Better Than Call of Duty asked me, it's not going to be for a while. It's not going to be for a while. Possibly by 2050, but maybe it'll take longer for that to happen. I could see 1 or 2 even European teams winning the World Cup for the first time before a team from another confederation does. But if you're putting me on the spot and you're asking me which confederation I think it'll be, I do think it's going to be CONCACAF. Um, so there you have it. And someone asked me the future of Netherlands and USA and Chile. Well, if you have guessed by now, I think the futures of two of those countries are pretty bright, and that is the Netherlands. Yes, I believe it, and I think the United States. Chile, I'm worried about because you look at the core of the Chilean national team now with Alexis Sanchez and Vidal. They're getting older, and the problem is that at the youth level, Chile is not as good as Argentina, Uruguay, Brazil, Colombia, or even Ecuador. And I don't see a new crop of Chilean players at the same level of Vidal and Sanchez, championship caliber ones that won the Copa America. I don't see them replacing the current guard of players. So I think Chile's going to. I think this is the end for Chile. I think after the 2019 Copa America, next 2 years from now, I think that's the last hurrah for this current generation. I mean, they already did not qualify for this World Cup next summer. So I think the tournament in Copa America, the subsequent summer, is going to be their last best bet. It's unfortunate, but things just run in a cycle, in cycles. I don't think Chile is going to be on the big stage and the big scene as they are now for a few years to come. And then as far as African teams, how do I think they can do next year in the World Cup? Uh if the teams who I think will qualify, I think there's a strong lineup. I mean, you have Nigeria so far, Egypt. I think Senegal's most likely going to make it now, even though I predicted Burkina Faso. Um, then you have Morocco or Ivory Coast going, most likely. And then you have Tunisia, DR Congo going, most likely. I think it's a strong lineup. As far as how well they could do, I mean, if we're talking like semifinals, I don't think so. Maybe quarterfinal if one of them has a little bit of. If one of them hits really good form and they get in really good shape, and then with a combination of a little bit of luck, I could see somebody like Nigeria or like a Nigeria getting to the quarterfinals, or maybe Morocco gets to the round of 16. Egypt getting to the round of 16. Senegal with Sadio Mane, I think anything can happen. Maybe they can get back to the quarterfinals. Imagine if Senegal do what they did from 2002 when they got to the quarterfinals. Imagine after all this long absence, they qualify again. They go to another quarterfinal. How incredible would that be? I think the weakest team that would probably qualify might be Tunisia. It'll depend on the group they get. If they get a somewhat navigable group, I think they can get to the round of 16 for the first time. But I think we could see as many as two or three, maybe even all, maybe more, maybe all African teams can get to the second round. Um, if we get a strong cast of teams that qualify this time. And as far as who can get to the quarterfinals, I think maybe only one or two can. So that should wrap up my video. I mean, this is me answering your fan requests. I hope you guys have a good night. This is a long video, but so I hope you take the time to listen to all of this because I put a lot of hard work in thinking what I'm going to say in my videos. So leave a comment below, like, subscribe, and God willing, I'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully. And yeah. Till then, have a good night. Much love and peace out.